Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, our guest is Kelila Green Siciliano, and she is a mom, a surrogate, a pregnancy loss survivor, the founder of OursAndYRS, a pregnancy loss survival toolkit, a speaker, and the host of the podcast, Pushing Through Loss. Kelila speaks about her experience with loss and how she learned to use personal challenges to work with and not against her in order to help her audience feel empowered to activate their own inner strength warrior. That sounds so fantastic, Kelila. I can't wait to hear about all of this in more detail. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited because I was a guest recently on your podcast to talk about pregnancy loss. That's how we connected. But before we get into all of that, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and perhaps how you became a speaker, podcaster, creator extraordinaire?
Sure. So the quickest version I can offer is that I grew up in Pennsylvania. I went to college in Boston, and I decided I was done with the cold weather and wanted to move to California. So I lived in LA from 2003 until 2021. I met my husband. We got married and pregnant literally within a year. We had known each other for a while. We were friends first, and then we dated, and that part of it, obviously. But we got married at the end of August in 2010, and literally 9 months minus a day, my daughter was born.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So everybody was like, what, did you just look at each other and it happened? And I was like, I don't know, but thank God, because I've always wanted to be a mom. Pregnancy came very easy to me. I didn't have any of the normal pregnancy symptoms that everybody seemed to complain about all the time, where it was like I didn't feel nauseous and I didn't have swollen ankles, and I felt like it was like my superpower. So about a year and a half goes by, and my husband and I had talked, and we said, I think we want to try for number two. So let's see what happens. And within about 6 months, I got pregnant again. And again, totally normal, totally healthy. He was actually a week late, and I think that last week was probably the hardest part of pregnancy I've ever had to go through, because every day that the baby's late, you're like, okay, it's like a year. Like, why isn't this child coming out? This is ridiculous. So, and I think that was the only time my friends were like, I don't think I've ever seen you get so frustrated with pregnancy. But I was done. I was for sure done. And then again, for the third time, my son was probably about 16 to 18 months old. And again, we were like, wow, let's try again. 2.5 years between each one would be fantastic. And again, it took about 6 months or so, and I got pregnant with my third right away. No problems. He was actually born a week early. And on the flip side of that, being a week late with my other son, my third son, I was like, I feel cheated. What? This is not fair. You were supposed to be in there an extra week. So, and even after I was done with labor and delivery, I looked at my husband, and I ended up getting an epidural about 19 hours into it, which I really was not hoping for. I was really hoping to do a natural pregnancy and natural labor. I said to my husband, I just want to push him back in there and do it again. He was like, I know you just had a baby, but you're crazy. I was like, but you don't understand. I love this. Because we were living in LA, it was one of those where it was like, okay, we have 3 amazing kids, but LA is expensive and day school tuition is expensive. We were homeschooling our kids at that point, but we didn't know what the future was going to hold. And I said, I really want to be pregnant again, but I'm not exactly sure that I want to have our own, because we're sort of at our limit at the moment. And I decided I was going to look into surrogacy. And yeah, so I'm Jewish, and I'm an Orthodox Jew, which means I'm fairly religious. And so when I started looking into it, I realized I needed to talk to the rabbis, because I needed to make sure that it was something I could do within the Jewish law structure. So
that is so interesting.
Yeah, there was a lot of different questions and back and forths, and the rabbi that I had spoken to ended up talking to rabbis in Israel, who then came back to him. And I was like, it's a little weird knowing that rabbis in Israel are talking about my uterus, but let's not think about that one.
Exactly.
And so I think it took a few months. It felt like it was forever, but really in the grand scheme of things, it didn't really take very long to find out all of the laws in Judaism and what it pertained to my kids and how it pertained to me and my husband and the family that we would get involved with. And so we ended up finding a Jewish family to be a surrogate for. They unfortunately could not have children of their own. They had tried many times and even went through IVF a bunch of times. And we instantly connected. I felt for them and I was like, if I can have a baby so easily, why wouldn't I do this for someone else?
Mhm.
And then I went in for the first transfer and they put in 2 embryos and I actually lost both right away. It like didn't even
Oh,
take.
I'm so
And I
Ugh.
sorry.
found out from, I think I found out from the mom. The doctor had called her first since it was her baby.
Mhm.
And I think I was more upset than she was because not that she wasn't upset that she had lost yet another pregnancy, but she had already been through this so many times. And to me,
Mhm.
this was the very first loss I had ever experienced. So I took it really hard and I was sobbing to my husband. And I said, I just want to know when I can start again. When
Mhm.
can I get on medication again? When can I get through this again? So we talked to the doctor and they said, look, because nothing even happened, like the embryos didn't even take, we can start with your next cycle. So we'll do 1 month to make sure that you're back on track, and then we'll start medication again. So I was like, great. So I went in again. From that point, it was officially 2 months later. And again, they put in 2 embryos and one took. And I gave birth in December of 2019 to an amazing little boy. I think even in the process of labor, I said to them, like, I'm ready to do this again. Whenever you're ready, just let me know. And I remember the dad looking at me like, you do realize you're about to have our child, right? Like, aren't you done? And I was like, no, I just love it. I love being pregnant. I love being in this like natural state. This is awesome. I feel like such a powerful woman. And he was like, okay, let's get through this and then we'll talk. Um, and then with COVID happening, obviously in March of 2020, it was one of those where it was like, okay, well, I have to take a break anyway. I wasn't allowed to get pregnant right away.
Mhm.
My doula had said you need to rest and you need to make sure that your body heals. And so she told me to wait at least a year. So I was like, okay, with COVID, like I couldn't get pregnant anyway. We were all in lockdown. And in February of 2021, my husband and I were like, we can't do LA anymore. It's just the lockdown was too rough for my kids. It was too rough for us. We looked all over the place, and I'm a big, big Disney aficionado. So Orlando was where we ended up. So I live 20 minutes away from Disney World as opposed to
Nice.
45 minutes from Disneyland in LA. And in January of 2022, I got the okay that I could start IVF again. So I think I went in May officially for the transfer of 2022. And with IVF, I don't know if your listeners know, but you have to basically get checked every week to make sure that the baby's in the right place. And you have to make sure that
Okay.
the heartbeat is strong, whatever it is. So I would go in every single week. And at 10 weeks, they graduated me into my normal OB as opposed to the fertility clinic. And they saw me at 10 weeks and they saw me at 12 weeks. And they said, okay, we'll see you back at 16 weeks for normal checkup. So I went home in my merry way and I came back in with my kids at 16 weeks and 5 days, and there was no heartbeat. And in that one moment, my life was flipped upside down. And I know, Jennifer, you know what that feels like. You were a little bit later than I was in having a stillborn, but it's it's like a panic that is like no other because there's literally nothing you can do.
Mhm.
My kids were in the room. I thought I was going in for a regular checkup, and my daughter was really the only one who saw that something was wrong. My 2 boys were, thank God, busy with the iPad and sort of oblivious to everything. And my daughter, who is very, very much like me, immediately saw that I was in distress in some way, shape, or form and came over behind my head. I was still laying down on the table and she like patted my shoulder and she said, is everything okay? And I just started shaking my head and crying. And she's like, what's wrong? And I just said, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And the doctor ended up coming in and he said, we need to get you to the hospital because you are over the time period that I'm comfortable letting you go home and just miscarrying this baby naturally. We need to put you into labor. If you need to be picked up, call your husband, figure out what you need to do. And it's so weird because it was so vivid of everything, every step that I did. And yet it's such a blur because I don't remember how I got home. I know I talked to my husband and I said, I'm fine driving home. I know I talked to my mom to let her know what was going on. And I was trying to get in touch with the parents, but I knew that they were in a meeting for the work that they did. And so I couldn't actually talk to them until maybe an hour later. So I was like in this panic mode of what do I do? And I remember getting to my door, and literally as my hand was on my doorknob was when the mom called. And I lost it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to tell her. My husband had to like walk me inside, and I just like collapsed next to my bed. And I ended up going into the hospital, and I was in the hospital for 2 days with labor and delivery. And then I had to go in for an emergency DNC afterwards. And it's a hell I wouldn't wish on anybody. A miscarriage at any stage is awful. A stillbirth at any stage is awful. But to have to go in, and I was like praying for my life because I was losing so much blood, and
Yep.
I had no idea what was going on. So after I came home and I was in recovery, I had a great support system, which I advocate for all the time. It does truly take a village to be able
Mhm.
not only to raise kids, but to help yourself. And if I didn't have my husband and my parents and my friends, I don't know where I would be today.
Right. So,
Big breath. Big
so
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that was a lot.
Yeah, no, no, no. Thank you for being so candid about all of that. I'm curious about a lot of it, but
Sure.
what happened with that particular couple? Did you go on to have a child for them, or
So the first child was for them.
that the first one?
Um,
Okay, so this was the second.
right. It
So
was
a
it's
sibling
surrogacy
for
world. It's
them.
called a sibling journey.
Okay.
Oh,
Um, it's we don't speak anymore, which is also very difficult.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I always say I can only control my own thoughts, my own speech, and my own actions. And I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what they're doing, and I can't control that. I can only
Right,
control what I do going forward. And I just have the most love and respect for them because I know how much they hurt.
right.
yeah.
Um,
It's actually very interesting because one of the things with my own pregnancy loss, one of the things that I was told in the hospital was to be very cautious and kind with my own marriage because a lot of couples split up after pregnancy loss because of the pain. So in some ways it kind of makes sense to me, but that maybe that was the easier split
maybe,
psychologically, not that it's right or wrong or
right.
anything, that just maybe that is a harder relationship to nourish at that point. I also, when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was working in a daycare, and my plan was to go to daycare every day with my child. And after I lost my baby, I showed up for about 2 days, and I just couldn't work in the daycare anymore.
Yeah,
Mm,
which
I
makes
just
sense.
couldn't do it. So, and it's not that I didn't love those children any less or wanted to do that kind of work. I just couldn't go back to that same place where I once was.
And
mm,
I think it's also the seeing other people's kids. Like even, and this wasn't even my pregnancy, which is the funniest part because I knew I needed a break. So I said to my husband maybe 3 weeks after I'd come home, I had been to Disney with my kids, and I was fine. Obviously, I go all the time because we live so close, and it's like my backyard basically. But I was like, I need to go by myself. I just need to walk down Main Street. It's my happy place. It makes me feel rejuvenated. And I got to one of the stores in Main Street, and I was looking around at some of the purses and the jewelry. And one of the women who worked there walked out and was very clearly like 8 months pregnant. And I caught my breath, and I just started sobbing. And I was like, I have to go. I ran out of the store, and I sat down on a bench, and I just sat there sobbing. And I called my husband, and I was like, I don't know what to do. He's like, just breathe. And that was really what helped me get through so much. I found so many different breathing techniques that I just focused in on one of them, and I was like, you're right. Just calm down and breathe, and I will be fine. Like I just need to get past this moment, and that's
yeah.
okay.
I really want to talk about how you come out the other side of this, right? Like how you basically survive this kind of loss. And I do want to get that to that, but I'm I want to go back to be being a surrogate and being Jewish. I'm really
Sure.
glad you touched on that in the beginning, because that was one of the things that I written down that I wanted you to talk about, was how it's different, or how your faith impacts your surrogacy journey.
Sure.
So, or how, just how, what effect it has on it, and what the different rules are, and things like that. Just, I mean, first of all, because I think it's incredibly interesting, but also if there's any of our listeners who are like, hey, I might want to get into this, but I don't know how my faith would impact it. I think it would be a really interesting thing to find out about.
Yeah, so in Judaism, in the Torah, there's 613 commandments officially. Everybody always talks about the 10 commandments, and those are like the main ones, right? And then on
Mhm,
top of that, there's 613 total. There's a lot that we can't do because we don't have the temple in Israel right now.
mhm,
The closest thing we have to it is the Western Wall. And so there's a lot of things that pertain to that like we can't actually really go up on the Temple Mount. It's not accessible so much to Jewish people at the moment. So there's a bunch that like I said, we can't do. Now, everything that the laws pertain to is everything from how you raise your children to how you thank God for the fact that your body works after you go to the bathroom, to what prayer you say when you hear thunder and you see lightning. I mean, so like, thank God. I love the idea that there's a prescribed thing for literally everything you could possibly think of. When I wake up in the morning, there's a prayer thanking God to say, I opened my eyes and I breathed life back into me in a way. Because when you're dead, there's a theory that you're like I mean, not when you're dead, sorry, when you're asleep, that it's like 1/60th of death because you're completely unconscious. And so
yeah,
the fact that you can wake up in the morning is a big deal. So when it came to having my own kids, I mean, you get together with your husband and that, that there's a lot of laws that go with that, but like it is what it is. But
Right.
there is a rabbi whose name is Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was alive in the 1900s. I don't remember exactly when he passed away, but I want to say it was sometime in the 1980s or 90s. If somebody else knows that listening, by all means, I could be wrong, so correct me on that. But he liked to look at the laws that were written 3,000 years ago and figure out really how it pertains to modern day. And one of
mhm,
those was and IVF wasn't such a big thing in the 80s and 90s, obviously, but they were just starting with test tube babies
yep,
and with adoption and
mhm,
with all those sorts of ideas. And so he looked into how the Torah could apply to modern day and what that meant. And so, for example, any child that a Jewish mother births is Jewish.
mhm,
And so, in that same vein, let's say I was giving a child up for adoption, I would have to give it to a Jewish family because of the
Uh,
fact that I'm birthing a Jewish child and it needs to be raised Jewish.
mhm.
So that's one of the laws that very much pertained to surrogacy, because if the family, any Jewish family can really go to any surrogate, but as a Jewish surrogate, I could only birth a baby for a Jewish couple.
Got it.
In that same vein, my children are not DNA genetically related to this child, but according to Jewish law, they're brothers and sisters.
Interesting.
Yeah. So even if they did a DNA test, I don't even know that they would find my blood in him anymore because it's
Right.
been 4.5 years since I gave birth and I have literally no DNA, not my egg, not my husband's sperm, nothing. But because my children and he shared a uterus, they're connected. So that means they
Yeah.
can
Wow.
never get married.
Wow.
So those are like the basic ones.
Yeah, and
Okay.
sure they're connected.
Right,
I mean, that's just sure.
right,
Of course they are.
right.
How
Wow.
how are you feeling about the legislation across the country that is attacking IVF?
I'm so glad you asked that. I was going to ask that.
IVF in the sense of abortion or in the sense of specifically on IVF?
I mean, they are a combined issue, of course, but I'm specifically talking about couples who want to conceive a child by IVF.
So I actually don't know if I'm completely up on the law right now because of the fact that I can't be a surrogate anymore. So it doesn't pertain to me. The abortion laws pertain to me, and my husband and I have a very religious ideal on that. but I don't know that I could speak enough on the specific IVF rules.
That's fair. That's fair. How did you decide to, because I just want to tell the listeners that I love your podcast.
It's very good.
I'm forgetting the
Thank
name
you.
of it right now. Tell us the name.
Pushing through loss.
Pushing through loss. I lost my baby over 20 years ago. Started listening to your podcast, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, something like that. It is still very relevant to me. And it helped me work through and continue to work through some of the things that I think were suppressed in me, some feelings and emotions. And because of our culture, perhaps we're just not open with these feelings. And so I'm wondering, how did you decide to start the podcast? Where did the spark come from, and why do you keep doing it? And this is a lot of questions all at once. And talk about the success in doing that, what it does do for people.
So let me start a little bit farther back, because I've always been a very curious person. Even from the time I was little, my mom tells a story that, and I actually very vividly remember this in her bathroom, but I came up to her when she was getting ready one day and I said, "Mom, how do bees make honey?" I think I might have been 5 or 6 years old. And she said, I don't know. It's a secret. And I said, "No, you could tell me. I can keep a secret." And she was like, "No, I really don't know." So, and of course now they might know, but like, I just wanted to know. I remember asking her where language came from. I just wanted to know everything.
Yeah.
And I think I feel the same way about loss. And I feel the same way about letting people express their feelings, because there's so much dissonance in the world, and there's so much distraction, and there's so much anger and anxiety and loss and all of it together. And to me, I'm like, if you talk about it, people can relate to each other and people can understand where you're coming from. And I don't care if you're Jewish or Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or I don't, whatever, wherever you come from, I think that's beautiful. I want to learn more, and I want to know why we do feel these emotions and why we can't seem to connect, even though we all have trauma. We all have a story. We all have something. So that's what keeps me going, is because I really want to just learn from other people, and I want other people to feel that community. I created it with that in the back of my head, but I actually have a very good friend who is a podcast host. She's done podcast classes, and for years she's been telling me, "You have so much to say. Why don't you do a podcast?" And I was like, "Well, I don't even know what to talk about." She's like, "Parenting, you homeschool your kids. I don't know anything." And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, yes, I like to be on stage. I like to be the center of attention, but I have no idea what I'm doing with podcasting. So not right now." And then I lost the baby 2 years ago in August. And this was last summer, and she was offering a podcast class, and it came up on my Facebook thing that it was like a free 5-day session, and then you could purchase the full class. And after the 5 days, I was like, "Oh, maybe I should do this." And then I talked to my husband and I was like, "I think I really want to purchase the whole session to make sure I can start the podcast properly." And he knows her also. We grew, we were in LA together for like 15 or 18 years or something. And he was like, "All right, well, I know you know her, so I know it's legit. Go for it." So then I finished the class in September or October of 2023, and I started my podcast at the end of November in 2023.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of successes have you felt, or kudos have you been given, or I don't know, how do you know it's successful?
So one of the ways was when I interviewed you, and what you said meant really so much when you said that you listened and you actually searched me out. And I was
I
so
did.
honored. I was so honored
Yep.
by that. And I the second I got off the call with you, I ran to my husband and I was like, "You will never believe the amazing woman I just spoke to. And she came to find me." And he was like, "That's incredible." So, and I don't know, I feel like as tragic and as awful as everyone's story is, I love that we get to this place of feeling like it's going to be okay. And and yeah, life really can throw curveballs at you and can really be awful sometimes. And I thank God every day I don't have trauma with a big T attached to me, but I can understand and empathize where other people come from in whatever their trauma is. I wanted to be able to use that to help others. I think that's why I became a surrogate too.
Yeah. It's a beautiful gift, actually.
Thank you.
I
Thank
can't
you.
think of a bigger gift,
Thank
actually.
you.
Well,
Somebody else, actually, one of my daughter's friends, her mom hasn't opened up to me about why she listens to the podcast, but we were at a Christmas party with another friend, and she came up to me and she said, I just want to tell you how impressed I am by you. And I was like, what? Me? Why? She said, I listen to your podcast every week and it's just so beautiful. And she started to cry, which made me start to cry. And I was so blown away by what she said. And I didn't want to dive too deep into why she was listening because we were at a Christmas party and I didn't think it was very um respectful to sit there crying in someone's corner of their house. But
Right.
and we've talked a bunch of times since, but just the way that I felt that I made her feel, and even if her trauma wasn't a miscarriage or a stillbirth, that I was somehow making her feel seen was
mhm.
really special to me.
Well, I think it's really important the work that you're doing
Thank
in
you.
giving people a place to, if not themselves, share their story, to then to hear other people share their story, because then they know that they're not alone,
Right.
right? Like, I know it's been very important for Jennifer to, to hear your podcast, and I'm sure it's incredibly powerful for other people as well. And one thing that Jennifer and I have talked about on the show before is it's it's so important for people to realize they're not alone in what they're going through.
Right.
And there shouldn't be anything shameful about experiencing a miscarriage, but so many people feel that shame. And if people don't talk about it, then we aren't doing anything to help them,
Right.
right?
And I think people feel the same way about death in general,
Hmm.
where I mean, my best friend lost her husband in February, unfortunately. And
Oh, sorry.
thank you. And it's one of those where I know, like, every chance I get, if she needs the space to talk about him, by all means, like, I'll
Right.
listen. I'll talk about him. I text her kids all the time, and her daughter was so funny. I'm very close with her kids they're almost 22 and 18, and I've known them pretty much since they were like 4 and 1 or whatever the age was back then. So very long time. And so the older one texted me and she was like, I had an epiphany. And I was like, go for it. She goes, you know how all Disney princesses don't have one parent? And I was like, yeah. She goes, I'm a Disney princess.
Ah, yes.
And I was
That's
like,
awesome.
I'm all in. And then she told people, because saying like it's my mom's best friend, she's like, it just sounds weird. So she's like, I'm just telling people you're my godmother. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm your godmother? Does that make me your fairy godmother? And she was like,
Yep.
yes. So we've created our own little Disney movie.
I love that so much.
This
That's
reminds me of
awesome.
something you say on your website. You say resilience is active, not
Mhm.
passive.
Yep.
What does that mean for you and the work you're doing, besides the story that you just told?
So when I first lost the baby, I couldn't sit still. I did find the times where like I needed to lay in bed for a little bit, but I was like, I need to do something. And I spent 3 weeks or something at my computer creating a workbook for pregnancy loss because I was
Wow.
like, I just need to do. And I feel
Mhm.
like if you sit and you're passive, life is just going to keep rolling by and the weeks are going to turn into months, which are going to turn into years, and you're going to be in the same place where you
Mhm.
were.
Mhm.
And you can't, my feeling is you can't live in that moment. You're still here and there's a reason why you're still here. And so there has to be a reason and there has to be something for you to live for, which makes you have to do something. I don't care what that something is, but it's active. It is something where you learn to breathe through it, or you learn yoga, or you go and you build a gazebo, or you run a marathon. Like, I don't care what that activation is, but you can't just sit in the same place because your life will pass you by. And before
Mhm.
you know it, you're done.
Yeah.
Right? What kinds of things are in the workbook?
My favorite thing, which actually that same daughter that I was just talking about, my best friend's daughter introduced me to well before I even had my own kids. We call it the 52 weeks of health. And what it is a calendar laid out in a grid. So it's every single day. It doesn't have to be labeled any sort of date. It doesn't even have to have January 1st or February 18th or whatever you want to put in there. As long as you've got all 365 days or 366 if it's a leap year. And every single day at the end of the day, you color in that box for that day of whatever the overall emotion is that you feel. So if it's happiness, you can mark that as green, or if it's sadness, you can mark it as blue, or if it's frustration, you can mark it as black, or if it's feeling loved, you can mark it as brown, or if it's anger, you can mark it as red. Whatever you want to make each color, you mark that emotion. And when you start looking back at this tapestry that you've created, you can actually pinpoint days where when you're in grief, you look back and you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what happened for the last week. But if you look at this calendar, you can be like, oh, a week ago, I actually had a really good day. Instead of feeling like they're just tumbling ahead without any sort of stopping point, or it's sort of like this weird continuous nothingness. So that's my favorite one. Some of the other ones are journaling pages. Some of them, my other favorite one is writing down the things that you can control versus what you can't control. So in the middle, I have a circle and it says, what can I control? And on the outside, there's another circle and it says, what can I not control? And the inside are things like the things that I say, my emotions, how someone's comment affects me. And you write down all the things that you can think of. And on the outside, it's like simple things like you can't control the temperature or the weather. You can't control the things that come out of other people's mouths. You can't control what your husband's going to do. You can't control what your sister's going to do. Whatever it is, you can fill in that bubble. And it really helps to look at, even in the moments of pregnancy or in loss in general, I can't control what happened. I can't go back and go through all the what ifs and what if I did this and what if I didn't do that and what if, we went to the doctor a day earlier, whatever it might be. It's so easy to think that that's all your fault, but those are things that are out of your control. And so if you can separate those two, it makes it, again, much more like almost like a brain versus a heart, because your brain tells you one thing and your heart tells you something else. And so you can separate the two and say, okay, really, what can I control and what can't I control? And what was my fault and what wasn't my fault? Because I guarantee you the loss is not your fault.
Right. So, okay, this is kind of a two-part question.
Sure.
One, is that workbook available for people to purchase? Okay, good. Awesome. Because then that feeds into the second part of this question, which is, what can we do for our loved ones who are experiencing a loss? Now I know, yes, we can buy them your workbook. But, aside from that, because as much as there is, there's shame and guilt and grief around the loss, there's also a lot of awkwardness and helplessness on behalf of on the side of the people who are loving those who have experienced that loss. So what can we do?
Okay, so let's start with the first question, because with the pregnancy, that's actually where the Pregnancy Loss Toolkit comes in. Because with the workbook, I actually put together a whole toolkit that has a mug that says you're not alone, and it's got some chocolates and fuzzy socks and a candle and like things that I knew that if I was getting something, that's what I would want as a care package afterwards. So that you can find that on my website, which is KelilaGreenSpeaker.com.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes, just putting that out there.
I also have a ring, which you can sort of see right here. It's a green ring. I partnered with a company called Enso, and they make these silicone rings in all different colors. And so I partnered with them, and I have 4 colors right now. Green is to signify a pregnancy loss. Purple is to signify a parent loss. Red is to signify a sibling loss. And then I think I've put silver as the last color, because thank God no one has done this one yet, to signify a spouse loss. And my idea was, a friend of mine had gone to the grocery store. She actually had a miscarriage 2 weeks before I did. And she still looked obviously a little bit pregnant. And she already has 5 kids in tow. And the cashier looked at her and said, "Girl, you are pregnant with another one and you've got 5 kids in the basket." And she was like, "Are you kidding me?" actually,
Oh.
no, I just lost my baby.
Painful.
And she started sobbing. And I was
Oh.
like, if we could just have this whole movement where somebody could just look down at your hand and see what color ring you were wearing, if you were wearing one, to know what kind of loss you've experienced. And you could either not say anything or understand that maybe you've had the same loss because you're wearing the
Mhm.
same color ring. And
Mhm.
so in that moment, I was like, oh my God, people just don't have a filter. Oh,
Well, yeah, that's true.
yeah. So I wear mine all the time. So for whomever ends up getting one and they see me, they know I'm wearing my green ring. And again, that's on the website also. And what can you do? It's a long and complicated question because like you said, it is awkward and it is, you don't want to say the wrong thing and you want to be helpful, but at the same
Mhm.
time, you don't know like, how do you cross that boundary?
Right.
Um, and I think a friend of mine really helped the most in what she did. And whenever I talk about her on my podcast, I'm always like, I talked about you because you were so awesome. She's like, me, but I didn't do anything. I'm like, no, you don't even know. So when it first happened, she came over right away and she actually took my kids from my husband so my husband could come to the hospital. Obviously, not everybody's available to do that. So if you can, great, like whatever way you can help, bring them food, bring them some sort of drink that just like a tea or a coffee or something like that to make them feel loved. But when I got home, she ended up coming over with a chocolate bar that was, I swear, like the size of my head. And she said, I know when I had a miscarriage, all I wanted was chocolate. And I was like, you had a miscarriage? I didn't know
Mm,
that. And just in that one sentence, we connected even more than we had in the time that I had already known her. And then
Mhm.
she just sat with me and I was crying and she's like, I'm here for you. And that was it. And she just held space. I didn't need to worry that I had to put on a face. I didn't need to worry that she was going to judge me for
Mhm.
being sad or even for being happy. Like it's one of those, and I know Jennifer, you and I talked about this, where afterwards you sort of get to this place where you're in this weird state of grief and you start laughing and you're like, oh, am I allowed to laugh? Like, is that
yeah.
okay? And so for her, I knew she wasn't going to judge me no matter what. And I remember a few weeks after she had said that, I saw her at the synagogue on Saturday, and I started crying when I saw her. And I said to her, I just want to be able to laugh with you again. And she said, don't worry. I know we are going to get to that point. And I think it took a few more months. I don't remember the exact date, but I remember she had come over on a Saturday afternoon and we were hanging out. We just started talking about something. We were laughing hysterically. And she's like, see, I told you we would laugh. And again, like
Yeah.
then I started crying and I was like, well, now it's over. But yeah, it's been 2 years and I don't feel guilty laughing anymore. And I think she helped more than she knew. So just
Th-
holding space.
Those are the beautiful human moments. And it's almost like your ring. She was
Yeah.
sharing, I had this too. I understand, maybe I don't understand exactly, but I do understand.
Right.
And 1 in 4 women experience a pregnancy loss.
It's actually much higher than that now.
Is it?
It's 1 in 4
Yep, yep.
pregnancies.
We said this on the last podcast. Yep, you're right.
Oh,
Yeah.
1 in 4 pregnancies. So
Yeah.
it's it's not everybody, but it's a lot of
It's a
people.
lot. And it's a
It's
lot more than they let on.
yeah, it's a lot of people. And so I think talking about it, saying it out loud opens the floor for other people to talk about it and say it out loud. And you don't have to keep it a secret and you don't
Right.
have to be ashamed of it and
mhm.
you don't have to hide it so that people are not uncomfortable and
And you
on and
can
on and on
choose
and on.
who to let in too. For example, like
Right.
you would think, how many children do you have? It's such an innocuous question. But at the same time, for someone who's lost a child,
It's horrible.
that one's a hard question. Because in the moment, 10 things go through your head where you're like, well, do I tell them about the children that I've lost or do I not? How many kids do I have at home versus how many kids don't? Like, what? I don't even know what the answer is.
Yeah,
Right.
21 years later, I still struggle with that question.
Yeah.
And when I say I have 3 children, people who know me are like, what?
Right.
And they know the story, but that's not top of mind for them.
Right.
Right.
So it's very interesting. I saw on your website that you said your motto is you're never alone when you know yourself.
Yep.
Why is that your motto? How'd you find it? And what does it say about you?
I'm an only child. So I
Ah,
spent a lot of time making up games. I used to play tennis by myself against the garage. My parents used to laugh because I would play Othello by myself and I would be both sides. So I'd turn one to white and
Nice.
then I turned one to black. And my mom would be like, "Who won?" I'd be like, "I did, duh."
every time.
Every time. Um, and I think it's really, really important. I tell this to my kids all the time, like turn off the devices, sit
Yeah,
with your thoughts. You don't need to have something else running in your head all the time. And if you know who you are, then everybody else is just icing on the cake.
I love that.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I just want to give you kudos because you talk about holding space, and that's exactly what you're doing. I mean, it's almost like you're giving people permission to talk about their losses and to realize that it's okay not just to talk about them, but to also to heal from them and to get to the other side where they're laughing again, or to even laugh while they're still grieving, that it's okay. It's all part of the process. And that there's no shame in it. That everybody's everybody's journey is their journey. And if somebody's got an issue with that, then they can kick rocks. Who cares?
Right.
You
There's
know?
a lot of people I know who have lost a child, a pregnancy, a spouse, whatever, and they've realized in that loss who they know their friends are
Mhm.
because of that exact reason. Where if somebody can't sympathize and just hold space, they're
Yeah.
like, I don't have time for this anymore.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
get real, real fast.
Yes.
It does. So the last question I have, I don't know if Raquel has more, but I am very interested in the fact that you are doing public speaking now. And on your public speaking part, you said something about activate your inner strength warrior. Tell us a little bit about your public speaking journey, the inner strength warrior. What's that all about?
Well, I love being on stage. I was actually, when I was in LA, I was in a community theater group for 16 years. And if I could say I miss anything of LA, that's like the biggest thing. It was all Jewish women. We performed musicals like Les Mis and like Thoroughly Modern Millie. And so I thrive being on stage.
That sounds
Um,
fun.
it is so much fun. And I've done it. I've done acting my whole life. I've done singing my whole life. And I
I can
don't want
see
to be
that.
I don't
Yeah,
want to
you've
be a
got you're
professional.
very vibrant.
Thank you. I don't want to do it professionally. I don't think I could deal with the rejection, but like doing it the way I do it was perfect. When I came to Orlando, it was definitely the one thing I was missing a lot. I didn't really know how I wanted to incorporate that. And then after I went through my loss and I realized that we all have something. And I remember even saying 4 years ago, I just want people to realize that they can be the victor in their own story and not the victim. And a few people got mad at me for that. I actually lost a good friend of mine that I've known since I was about 14 because she was like, "How could you say that?" And I'm like, "Look, we all have a story. We all have
Yeah.
something."
Hmm.
And I want you to know how strong you are. So when I speak to people, I want them to get that. I want them to know that resilience is not something that people are just born with. It is something, like I said before, that is active. You can't just sit passively in your own life. But there are definite steps that you can take to really hone in on that instead of saying, like, well, okay, but that person seems so resilient and she seems so happy. And how do I get to her? I didn't just get here because I sat here doing nothing. I got here because I delved into all these different techniques of breathing. And I don't like yoga, so I can't even say I love meditation, but being alone with my own thoughts and learning skills to really boost that resilience. And I love watching, I homeschool my kids really for that reason, because I love watching them learn. And I love when they get that moment of clarity and it's like, oh, I can do that. So watching adults do it is even more incredible because they've spent their whole lives being like, but I can't and I don't know how. And all of a sudden it's like, but you do know how. You just need some extra little boosts and some extra little steps to push you in the right direction, which is also why my podcast is called Pushing Through Loss, because
Mhm.
it is a painful process. And my friend who is very much a holistic healer, and I am very much into the energy therapy as well. We both say that emotion is energy in motion. And
Yep.
if you keep it all in there and bottle it all up, it's going to eat you alive. As
Mhm.
opposed to deal with the hard stuff. Work through it. Don't just ignore it. It's not going anywhere if you ignore it. It's going to stay right there. But if you can actually learn techniques to push through it and to sit with it for a few minutes, I promise you the other side is so much better.
Nice.
Thank you.
Wow. Kelila, I have to say, I personally have not had a pregnancy loss, but like many people, I've experienced loss in, hard times and whatever. But hearing people like you talk about getting to the other side and what you can do, and just seeing how, like I said earlier, how vibrant you are, doing this work, and you're helping so many people. I mean, I just know that you're helping so many people.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you are doing. I mean, this is just,
Yep.
this is amazing. You're doing incredible work, and just the way that it's grown, just from the beginning to now, like now you're doing like public speaking and doing all the things, and you have this podcast and all that. Your example, I think, is very important for people too, that you can have such a significant loss and grow through it. And it's going to look different for everybody, and maybe not everybody is even going to get to that point, because if you don't deal with it, it's not going to happen, and not everybody's going to deal with it. But I really think that you're basically, you just living your life is a great example for people. So
Thank you. Thank you so
thank you for
much.
doing, seriously, thank you for doing that, and for sharing all of it with people and being so vulnerable. I think that's incredibly important.
Thank you.
So,
I do want to add one caveat, because I know that
sure.
like even yesterday I had a conversation with somebody and she was like, you just look like you have your life put together. And I was like, I am glad that it comes out that way, because trust me, I still experience the awful stuff. Like I'm not immune to it.
Well,
I
you're
am not.
human.
Exactly. But like I tend to hide it a little bit better. So I just want to say, like, I know that I always have a smile on my face, but yes, I do get frustrated. I do cry. I do get angry. I do yell at my kids. I do yell at my husband. Like, it's all, I swear I'm normal. I swear.
Well, then
We
that
all
makes me feel a little bit better, because now I know you're not a robot. So it's
No,
okay.
no, definitely. And my husband would be like, she's nuts. But I love him and he loves me, thankfully.
beautiful. Was there anything you wanted to tell our audience that we didn't give you the chance to?
No, I think you guys covered some incredible questions. I'm just so grateful to be on your podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for
Yeah.
being here.
Yeah, my
It's
pleasure.
so great to meet you.
It's amazing to meet you. And Jennifer, it's so good to see you again.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you ready to recap, my friend?
Yes. First off, I have to thank you for bringing Kelila into our little universe. I mean, I know I've said vibrant already like 100 times, but she's such a force, and
Yeah.
her energy is so amazing, and what she is doing, and just what a huge heart she has.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Jennifer, thank you for connecting us all with Kelila. So yeah, she's awesome.
My pleasure. I don't even remember why I started listening to the podcast.
Because you
Maybe
were
I was,
supposed to. You found it because you were supposed to.
yeah, maybe it was a guest or something I was following. But what I do remember is after I listened to the first one, I listened to like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 in a row. Several, I listen when I take the dog out walking.
Yeah.
And I just remember being struck by, like I said earlier, oh my gosh, this was 26 years ago.
Mhm.
It's still a significant part of my life. It still impacts what I do. And after that pregnancy loss, it's really interesting that she talks about Disney, because what my parents did was they bought my ex-husband Pablo and I a trip to Disney
Oh,
to
wow.
kind of I don't know, to get out of Dodge, to gather our
Yeah.
thoughts, to reconnect. And I remember walking down Main Street of Disney as well, and I I still looked pregnant. I couldn't fit into any real summer clothes. I felt obese and uncomfortable, and the kids were running around. Families, we looked at the families and we both cried. But what I can say about that in retrospect, because in the moment it didn't feel so good, but in retrospect, it did give us the opportunity to cry, to sit and cry together as a couple for the loss of what we felt was a family at that time. We
Right.
didn't lose our family. We now have two beautiful girls that made it, that continue to thrive. But I do think that grief process is really, really important. And grief is like a wave, it hits its peaks and it subsides, but then a peak will come out and it'll subside. And once in a while, I'm just really caught off guard with how much grief I can still have for this baby that I barely got to hold. I also have a niece that is going through IVF right now, and they had one that was a viable pregnancy last year, right before Christmas. They lost their baby. And I just know how important IVF is for the world, for these people who want to be parents. And even with IVF, it's hard and difficult. Corey, who was on the podcast.
Yep.
Corey Allen, becoming a father. This was the only way for him to become a father. And I just, what a gift. Someone who can do surrogacy, carry a baby for another couple and give life to that baby and that family to help complete a dream. It's that is an incredible human being that can do that.
Right.
I'm in awe. And I was not like her. I puked my guts out all the time. I was not a happy pregnant woman. Not for a minute. So I'm very, very jealous. Very jealous.
Well, I think it's, like I said before, I think it's just so great that more people are talking about all of this, their journey with loss, their journey with grief, their IVF journeys. I mean, all of it. These aren't things that people need to keep in the dark. These are things that people need to be able to talk about these things. There shouldn't be shame around these things. And your vulnerability, and your candor, as well as Kalila's and, other people who are being open about all of this, it only serves to help other people to feel less shame and to feel safer to talk about what they have gone through, are going through, all of it. So I think that's huge that we recognize that y'all are doing what you can to make it easier in some way. I mean, it's not an easy journey, but you're at least taking some layer of weight from that journey for other people.
To normalize the discussion.
Yeah.
It's 1 in 4 pregnancies.
Yeah.
That's 25% of the pregnancies. So probably many people that have experienced a pregnancy loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it may not be too far off to say that maybe everybody knows somebody who has experienced a miscarriage.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I thought was a real important part of this discussion also is, yes, we are opening the door to talk about it, but you also don't have to talk about it. and
Yeah, it's up to you.
And to possibly have discernment about who is a safe person. I really love the idea of a friend. I love the idea of the ring, of I see that green ring. I know it's somebody who's had a similar situation. This might be the person I do my first opening up with, because I know it's a safe space.
Yeah.
Or something along those matters, because there still is a lot of I don't think there's any maliciousness to it, but there's still a lot of risk if you speak to people who aren't, I don't even have the right word, well-meaning people who say the wrong thing.
Right. Which, just kind of adds to the awkwardness that those of us on the other side are like, I don't really know what to say. But maybe you just say, hey, I don't know what to say, but I can listen and I can give you a hug if a hug is what you want.
I actually think that's the perfect thing to say. Because as someone who's experienced loss, you don't know what to say to me to comfort me. I also don't know what to say about it, but if you said that to me and I take my hug from Raquel and I'm like, maybe today will be the day I open up, maybe it won't be, but I know that I'm safe too.
Good.
And that's a beautiful thing.
Good.
Yeah. And I encourage people to explore the idea of, what was it that she put together? The Pregnancy
The
Loss
workbook.
Survival Toolkit. I would have liked to have something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe not the day of, maybe wait a week or so, but yeah. I'd like to explore some options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's a good call to action for our listeners. If you know someone who has experienced a pregnancy loss, or you yourself have, listen to the episode, share the episode, get the loss toolkit that Kelila has created for yourself or for someone else.
Listen to her podcast.
Yeah, listen to her podcast.
Pushing Through Loss.
Yeah, I mean, because she speaks so beautifully about
Right.
all of this, as I'm sure people can tell by this interview. But share this information, whether you yourself have gone through this or somebody who has, just, share it.
Yeah.
A lot of people can benefit from it, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Raquel. Thanks,
Thank you, Jennifer.
listeners.
Thanks, y'all. Thanks, everyone, for listening today. We will be back with more Madness Cafe next week. You can find us on Instagram at Madness Cafe Podcast or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com. Bye.